Hello, I'm Andrea, and today on the channel I am going to show you how to make my mom's apple cobbler. It is so good, so make sure you have some ice cream to go on top of this. Coming up next. Pastry. The cobbler pastry is a little thicker than a pie pastry, so just a little more substance, so it can soak up a lot of juices and still hold its structure. So in my bowl, I'm adding 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking powder and a teaspoon of salt. And we're just going to give this a quick little mix. And then we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of shortening. And we're just going to cut that in. And we're going to use a fork. All right, once you've got it to where it looks kind of crumbly like this, now we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of whole milk. Now traditionally your pie pastry will call for ice water, but this actually calls for milk. And there we go. So I would just wrap this and let it rest in the fridge until you have your cobbler ready to go. So in my saucepan, I'm going to add a 1/2 stick of butter, and we're going to get that going on medium heat. Just kind of get it melted. Now, this recipe is going to make like a 9x9 size cobbler. So if you're looking to make a bigger cobbler, you know, for your family or a gathering, then just double everything, including the cobbler crust. So, because you'll need a top and a bottom. But I don't need a ton of cobbler, so my husband doesn't eat it. So I'll probably wind up just dishing some up and sending it down to my mom's house. So, and we'll probably just freeze it because it will freeze okay, and then she can have some later. So we're just going to get our butter melted here. So my mom used to make apple cobbler all the time in the fall and winter months. We had, near where I grew up, they had a big apple orchard, and they were always, you know, in the fall, always sold lots of apples. So she would usually go and get like a bushel or a, you know, a big box of apples in the fall, and then she would store them and make cobblers and apple butter and just all kinds of apple goodness. So, all right, so our butter's melted. I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar and then 1 cup of water. And we just want to bring this to a boil. And I'm also going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we're going to add a little bit of fresh nutmeg. If you don't have fresh nutmeg, then add about 1/4 teaspoon, maybe a little less. If you don't have nutmeg or you don't care for it, then you don't have to put it in. All right, so our sauce is boiling. So we're just gonna let this go for about a minute. And on my clean counter, I'm just gonna sprinkle some flour. And we're gonna cut this in half, and we're actually gonna go about 2/3 to 1/3, actually, instead of a half. Set that there. Okay. And then I'm just going to dust this with a little bit of flour. All right, so let's get this rolled out. I like to just kind of turn my dough on the counter. It just helps to keep it from sticking. Even though we have flour, it still will tend to stick. So I just kind of give it a couple of turns. Sometimes put some more flour underneath it. So we got our cobbler dough in. And if you have any tears, you can just kind of patch it with some of your extra here. Now I've gone on ahead and diced up 6 apples. Now they weren't large apples, they were only about like yay big around. So 6 of those. So we're just gonna dump those in. And they will cook down, so don't worry if you feel like you've got too much, they will cook down. And then in my bowl here, I've got 2 tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to add 1/4 cup of flour, just all-purpose flour. And then I'm going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And we're just going to mix this up. And then we're just going to sprinkle this kind of over the top of the apples. There we go. And then we're going to pour our sauce in. And then we're going to roll out the rest of our dough for the top. All right. I'm just going to roll that over the top. Just going to kind of roll these edges in, and if you have too much, just pinch it off. We're just going to take, you can take a fork and just kind of dock it so you've got some breathing here. You could take a knife and just kind of make some little slits on it if you wanted to. There we go. Now we're going to bake this at 350 degrees, and it's going to take probably close to 45 minutes, so it's fairly deep, so I'll see you in a little bit. All right, our cobbler is done. I baked it for an hour just because mine is so deep. You can kind of see how tall the pan is. So it was pretty thick. So just keep an eye on yours once you hit that 45-minute mark, and then just kind of gauge it from there. If you're in a more shallow pan, then it may not take nearly as long. So I just let this sit and cool for like half hour, 45 minutes. So we are just going to cut into this. Now I wish I would have had some ice cream. So, but there we go. You can see how wonderful that looks in there. So serve that with some ice cream and you are good to go. All right, well, I hope you enjoy this recipe. If you do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like it, share it, and all that goodness. Until next time.